As you will see in the slide in front of you, there are several housekeeping notes. If the moderator opens the floor and if you wish to take the floor, please click the raise hand icon and your name on the participants panel will appear. The moderator will call your names based on the order of the raised hands. After speaking, unmute yourself and make sure you click the lower hand icon button. Now, you may also wish to type questions in the chat box and send to everyone. So that's very important. And if you need any technical assistance, put your message in the chat box and send it to the host or co-host, and you will be helped immediately. Please help us improving this experience by filling out the survey at the end of this webinar. And lastly, we have a following disclaimer. The views expressed by speakers, moderators, and participants during these pre-COP6 online events are those of the individuals concerned and do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of the Secretariat of the Minamata Convention on Mercury. Thank you very much for listening, and I pass the mic on to Thomas.
Thank you very much, Richard. I think I'm now sharing my screen. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues. My name is Thomas Verbaer. I work for UNEP in the Secretariat of the Global Mercury Partnership, and I'm really happy today to be emceeing this pre-COP side event on the review of the implementation of the Article 7 from guidance to implementation. And to start with, I'm actually really happy to have with us today Susan Keane will give us some opening remark. Susan Keane is a Senior Director at the National Resource Defense Council, but most important, she has been, I think, a key actors for the global work on mercury pollution in the ASGM sector as the co-lead of the ASGM partnership area of the Global Mercury Partnership. Susan, thank you for being with us, and the floor is yours for your remark.
Thank you, Thomas. So, hi, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, and evening to everybody. I'm very pleased to be here on behalf of myself and my co-leads of the Global Mercury Partnership, ASGM partnership area. I'm especially gratified to participate in today's event that will present new initiatives that add further momentum to the efforts of parties to reduce and, where feasible, eliminate the use of mercury in the ASGM sector. So first of all, I'd like to provide a little history on the partnership's engagement with the convention, both on Article 7 generally and on the national action plans specifically. While the convention was still being negotiated, our partnership members were already undertaking a range of voluntary efforts to reduce mercury use in the sector, and some were actually already piloting approaches to developing national strategic plans to address ASGM. And because of this deep expertise, the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee turned to the partnership for information and inputs on the possible structure of convention obligations, which we'll hear about today, including the elements that should be included in Article 7 generally, and in the NAPs as defined under Annex C. So then once the convention was agreed, the partnership members stepped up again, and we worked together to draft the guidance for developing national action plans, which was endorsed by the COP at its first meeting. So here we are now. 37 countries have produced and submitted national action plans with ambitious commitments to reduce mercury use in ASGM, backed up by strategies for formalization, technology transfer, management of mercury trade, addressing public health, and providing information to communities, all while engaging multiple stakeholders in the process. The GEF-funded Planet Gold program has been a key instrument in supporting many of these countries to make substantial progress in putting their NAP strategies into action. So today's webinar will describe the natural next step in this progression. The webinar will cover a proposed update to the NAP guidance to include guidance on the review of progress on implementing Article 7, including NAP strategies. It will also describe a new GEF-funded effort to test these review procedures on the ground. It's really difficult to overstate the importance of ongoing review as a means to help ensure that the convention actually results in significant mercury reduction in this sector. which is, after all, the largest source of mercury pollution in the world. The NAPs cannot simply be ambitious plans that remain plans but are never realized. As required by the convention, it is crucial that parties regularly review progress on their strategies, understand what is working and what is not, and pivot to new approaches as needed. And importantly, report on these efforts so that everyone can learn from successes and failures and accelerate global progress together. The partnership remains ready, as we've done since the beginning of the convention, to support these efforts as needed. I'm looking forward to a very interesting webinar today, and thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Susan, again, for your very important remark, and very interesting again to have to understand all the journey that has been done to reach this point of the RIA here today. Without further ado, I will invite the next speaker that I'm sure everyone knows, Richard Gutierrez from the Minamata Convention Secretariat, and also I like to have him as a ASGM expert, as I think we've seen. Richard, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Thelma, for your very kind introduction, and also thank you so much, Susan. I've had the pleasure of working with Susan for many years, and to be here at the same event as her, and then looking at the product of the years of toil feels like deja vu all over again. Next slide, please. So, thank you very much, Thelma. I just want to start again by echoing what Susan said in her opening remark. There's a critical need for parties to regularly review progress of their NAP, understand what's working and what is not working, and more critically, pivot to new approaches as needed. And the slide in front of you, I think, and I hope, exemplifies the landscape in which we are operating at this point in time. As you can see, this is a graph of the price of gold from January 2016 and as of October 14. As you will see, and if you were note, and if you've been following the convention entered into force in August of 2017. And you can see from the graph, it's almost stable. And right now we're on a historical high at $4,129 per ounce of gold. If that's not enough to motivate you to understand the context in which we are in, I hope it's enough motivation for you to understand the importance, the critical importance of the review of the national action plans. Because what was true in 2017 may not no longer be true as of October 2025, at least for the price of gold. Next slide, please. So very quickly, ASGM. As you all know, and you might have, already, it's a complex socio-economic, social development issue. It produces 20% of gold globally, employs 10 to 20 million people in rural areas. And to the left, to the bottom left of the slide, you will see and note, and the critical importance and role ASGM plays. It is major polluter in terms of global emissions and releases of mercury, with 38% of global emissions coming from that sector at around approximately 2,000 metric tons. But as equally important is ASGM is a clear livelihood source for many people across the globe, and often this type of sector is informal. Now, what does the convention provide? Next slide, please. And I'll go through it very quickly in terms of overview. There's a basic obligation under the convention that any party that has ASGM using mercury amalgamation in its territory, and you will find what I'm saying right at the very center of the slide, is that they need to take steps to reduce and, where feasible, eliminate mercury use. Now, if a party finds that mercury use in mining and processing is more than insignificant, a couple of obligations kick in. They have to notify the Secretariat, they have to develop and implement a national action plan, submit the national action plan, and at the very bottom, provide a review every 3 years. Now, let me clarify this because some people might misunderstand. The review of the implementation of Article 7 applies to both parties that have not yet submitted the NAP or are still in development of the NAP, and for those as well that have developed the NAP. The only difference is that guidance documents might be different, but there is an obligation under Article 7 to review, and both sets of parties under Article 21 have an obligation to report the results of that review. Next slide, please. Now, this slide, you will see the National Action Plan, the Annex C elements. It's just presented in sort of a nice graphical form, but take note, these are 11 elements, and you can find this in Annex C. I won't go into the details on this, but more importantly, you have strategies to eliminate worst practices, steps to facilitate formalization, etc. So these you can find in Annex C, and these elements should be in the National Action Plan. Next slide, please. Now, here you will see to the left a picture of the guidance document that was developed by UNEP in collaboration with the Secretariat and the Global Mercury Partnership way back when in COP4. It has been amended with sound tailings management, a technical document. So this guidance is not static. It's continuing and it's evolving as the need arises. Next slide, please. What's important for us coming into COP6? The next slide will show you, next slide, please. I'll draw your attention to the left of the screen. You have item 4C. So this is going to be coming up at COP6 this November, and it's going to be discussed. As you will note on the left side of your screen, there are 3 documents under consideration. There's what we call a working document 6/7, an addendum document, as you can see in the middle, which is add 1, and then int 11. The critical document that I want to present to you today is 611 add 1, which is draft sections on the review of the implementation of Article 7. Now, the document contains proposed amendments to the NAP guidance, which you saw in the previous slide. And this was, excuse me, and the aim of the proposed section is to facilitate reviews and support the national focal points to organize the information and to facilitate reporting. As I mentioned earlier, these are dual obligations under Article 7 to do the review and Article 21 to report on the results of the review. Now, these draft sections were co-developed with the Global Mercury Partnership and with the ASGM partnership leads. Now, the review guidance is aimed for parties who have submitted their NAPs to the Secretariat. As I mentioned earlier, for those parties who have not submitted their reports, they are still obligated to report under their full national reports. Next slide, please. Now here, let's talk in detail a bit more on what the Addendum 1 or what the new additions to the NAP guidance contain. Now, to your right, you will see at the second line, what are the new sections to 4.7? As I mentioned, these are draft sections to supplement the existing guidance that's in the NAP guidance. What makes it special is that it elaborates this review process and just to make sure that parties who have started the development and implementation are able to go back and look at what they need to do. So some of the key highlights are in section 4.7, which is first to check the mandate of the coordinating mechanism and ensure the multi-stakeholder participation. As you note, many of the national action plans that Susan mentioned earlier that have been submitted 2016, 2017, 2018. Some of the mandates might have been old. There might be changes in administration. So it's important that before you undertake any review, that you should double check on the mandate of the coordinating mechanism. Second, collecting and comparing data against baseline survey, monitor and assess progress, make sure that the NAP objectives and targets are covered, evaluate and adapt, and report the findings. Report the findings, because that's going to be critical. Now, in the review of the, another new section that it might be of interest, especially to the national focal points who are listening in, is this new Annex 7 on the review of the implementation template. So essentially, this sort of template helps sort of identify the status of the NAP implementation, tracks progress, also indicates challenges and delays in next steps, and encourages inclusion of disaggregated data for Indigenous peoples, women and children, and gender-responsive indicators. Next slide, please. Here you will have, in this slide, you just see a quick snapshot of what I was saying. in terms of what the review template looks like or the reporting template looks like. So it's a very simple table that, again, hopefully can facilitate reporting by the national focal points. Next slide, please. This is a critical item that's also integrated in the review process, and that is the provisional guide on the effective engagement and participation of Indigenous peoples. Now, under Decision 5.7 of the Convention, it's highlighted the impact of Mercury on Indigenous peoples and the need to broaden engagement. So the Secretariat, through that work and also through the mandate under 5/1, with the support from Australia and Norway, developed what we call the provisional guidance on the effective engagement of Indigenous peoples. This was basically a desk review looking at existing best practices and reminding parties to make sure to integrate stakeholders such as Indigenous peoples, local communities, and youth in the development, implementation, and review of their national action plans. Next slide, please. And also another document coming up very soon is a technical document for reporting on progress in meeting the Minamata Article 7 obligations. This is a longer document that fleshes out methodologies and as well as tools to help governments understand and conduct, look at the technical level of the review they're doing as a means of supplementing its work in reviewing Article 7 implementation. So there's a lot of, I hope that what I've covered helps illustrate the importance of the RIA, the review of the implementation of Article 7, the need to look at what's working, and we hope that at COP6, the parties can consider and look favorably upon this document and adopt and hopefully adopt to encourage parties to who are conducting their review to use this document to help both understanding what's working and what's not, and also to report it, because without reporting the results of the review, the conference of the parties, the implementation and compliance committee, the effective evaluation group will not be able to get that data. So part of what makes the national action plans working, as being a working document, is the review process and the reporting of the results of that review. So I end my presentation there. Thank you very much for listening, and I will stay online for any questions. Back to you, Toma.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you for this presentation and for running it so smoothly. It's a very technical topic, and I think you really managed to cover everything. Again, colleagues, don't hesitate to drop question in the chat. We'll have some time allocated at the end to respond and to discuss. Now, I would like to invite the next speaker, a UNEP colleague working in the Jeff Chemicals and Waste Unit, Iñaki Rodriguez, not only a project manager, but also has countless experience working on the ASGM sector. Iñaki, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tomas. Thank you, colleagues. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, for dear participants. I'm very happy to be here and joined with these excellent speakers. Thanks, Susan, for setting the floor in such a nice and interesting way, and also Richard, as Tomas just explained, to provide this technical overview from the Minamata Sec perspective, which is the baseline and foundation for our work. As Tomas was mentioning, I am a project manager in one unit of UNEP, which is basically the implementation arm of UNEP when it comes into work related to chemicals, and in particular, the focus on mercury, as we have today, right? So, well, the idea of my presentation, what I want to share with you, is what are we going to do from a practical perspective and technical perspective in order to bring all this knowledge, all these capacities we in-house at UNEP are developing towards the parts of the convention, to the members of the convention, and to the broader community of people involved in the regulation of the ASGM sectors at the national level, and which are supporting the efforts of the convention in reducing the use of mercury within the sector. So please, next slide. As I mentioned, the idea for us was to discuss jointly with the Jeff, which is the funding mechanism for the Minamata Convention, therefore the financial mechanism for any kind of technical activities supporting the convention, and also with the Secretariat, how we could bring all this ideas that were discussed and that were, so to say, ongoing through the process of the NAP development into a more concrete, ready-to-use tool that countries could apply in order to update this information into the NAPs, right? And this is how this, what we call the RIA project came, right? So the idea is to explain a little bit what's the main ideas related to this project, with a particular focus on key elements that we are expecting to obtain, and also how we're going to execute these activities, and also to share some more ideas about the technical guidance already discussed with Richard, and probably give you a timeline so participants can have a broader overview of the entire process, right? Next slide. So what we have already discussed, I've seen already in this webinar, is that there's a need to update information. ASGM sector evolves, changes, and as Richard was explained before, there's been a tremendous change, a tremendous push for more ASGM. Therefore, the national action plans are no longer valid in many cases, right? But these national action plans were not done out of the scratch, but done through a technical support. And this is what we want to replicate in these projects, right? So the idea is to take all these methodologies and new approaches and new information that we are drafting and collaboratively we are developing in UNEP towards countries. So countries are capacitated to learn, understand, and improve the national action plans and have the resources needed to continue doing this report as time goes by. Because one of the key elements of this project is to ensure that parties of the convention, people working in the different ministries involved in the relation of the sectors and supporting the Minamata Convention can have the technical knowledge to continue updating and informing the Secretariat about the changes in the national action plans towards time, right? So the idea is to facilitate this review of the implementation of Article 7, right, through a number of activities that will be conducted by UNEP and will support different countries. Next slide, please. How are we going to do that? We, from a logical perspective, we have tried to synthesize this approach into 3 different project components. First one is basically devoted to all the technical knowledge that us, UNEP, have developed and want to share with the different parties, right? So this is going to be all the guidance, the capacity building, and all the knowledge management that is going to be shared with the different parties, right? So the participant countries in the project will benefit from trainings and dissemination work that is going to be conducted from different experts in-house that we have, that or technical experts that collaborate with us, and will emphasize the different aspects of this methodology that is going to be discussed and hopefully adopted in the upcoming Minamata COP6. At the same time, what we thought it was important for this project is to keep the knowledge not only at the country level, but also at the global level. And to do so, the idea is to not only support different parties in the update of the National Action Plan strategies, the improvement of these strategies, but also to create and disseminate this information globally. We have different platforms, just for example, the Minamata Convention website, where we have the different national action plans, Minamata initial assessment reports, and all the different regular reports provided by the convention. But we also have the Global Mercury Partnership website, UNEP website, and related. And the idea is to create different documents, reports, knowledge products in general that can be used freely by academia, policymakers, or people interested in in learning about this process, right? So knowledge and information is there and will be available for parties to take, right? There will be a second, let's say, component from a logical perspective, a second set of activities, will be basically the core work, in the sense that it will be the activities related to the review, the update of all the NAP strategies at each country, and the drafting and endorsement by the different stakeholders at the national level of this new updated information, right? So that will be all the field work that we all love, but also the discussions internally at the national level to disseminate and endorse this new information and to adapt at the national level with different national stakeholders what is needed to achieve the expected results described in national action. And finally, the idea is, because this is a pilot initiative, it's going to be the very first time that we are going to develop a real project. So the idea is not only to monitor the progress and to assess what's the progress achieved by the different participating countries, but at the same time to learn what things have, things need to be improved, what things have worked, what things don't work. So as we described at the beginning of this webinar, we can update as well our guidances and methodologies to improve and be more efficient. So we can better support the different parties of the convention in order to achieve what we all want, which is a reduction of the use of mercury within the sector. Right. Next slide, please. So in more detail, what we're going to do in this first component, which is the overall guidance, is to develop knowledge products and tools that are going to be available for parties to update this information, to provide these new baselines, to engage with the new stakeholders, to address the gaps described or identified in the national action plans, and at the same time to provide these technical trainings to the participating countries. The second component, which will look at the work at the national level, will have similarly two main expected results. The drafting of this RIA process, it means the new drafting of documents, the new drafting of strategies, the new drafting of information which was not included in the initial drafts, and secondly, the submission and endorsement of the different reports at the national level and also to the Minamata Secretariat. Right. The idea is not to develop a new full-size national action plan. We want to take stock from the existing information and based on that, rebuild and improve the ongoing existing experiences described in the national action plan. That's why we have, for example, the next speaker, which will describe the experience at the national level while working on a national action plan. And at the same time, what we want is not to lose track of this process and to ensure that this process is shared with all stakeholders at the national level and endorsed by them. So that's an idea that's very important for us, and we want to kind of highlight through the entire process is the need to endorse these strategies by all different stakeholders at the national level. We have a variety of stakeholders within the ASGM sector, from the very end, which is the miners themselves working on the ground, to the policymakers and different stakeholders in the private sector or public audience, right? And as such, all of them are relevant in order to have effective national action plan, not effective national strategies to reduce mercury, and an effective updated information through the RIA process. Right? Next slide. So another idea that we would like to share with you is that key elements that parties might want to look when developing or working with UNEP or any other JF implementing agency in the development and implementation of a RIA project, which will be first, in-person trainings for national teams. Thanks to the development of national action plans, every single party has what we call a national team working on Mercury, right? It's composed typically by members of different ministries involved, technical national consultants, technicals at the different ministries, or maybe national academia, right? So the idea is to provide this training and transfer of knowledge to this national team already existing, improve the composition of those teams, and also to provide technical reviews to the drafting documents, right? At the same time, another key activities that will be at the core of the intervention will be the data collection, right? There will be a need, sometimes depending on the context of the countries, to go to the field, obtain new data, and update profiles in terms of mercury use, in terms of parties involved in the sector, in terms of legal regulations, etc. And then it will be important to follow up and obtain the final outcome for this will be the submission to the Secretariat. And finally, as I mentioned, there will be on our side as responsibility for UNEP a review process, a monitoring process where we will try to learn what can be improved and how can we smooth the process so upcoming members can replicate this new inception work at the RIA process. Next slide. So in terms of funding, we have described that this will be enabling activity type of project. So a project fully funded by the GEF, which in the case for the first inception work that we're going to do, we have grouped this project into 23 countries into two big groups, one for Anglophone countries and one for Francophone Spanish-speaking countries. We have 11 and 12 countries. And based on discussions at COP5 with GEFSEC, UNEP, and Minamata Sec, the discussion was to allocate $200,000 per country to cover those activities, with a timeline of the duration of 2 years, 24 months, to develop and cover all the activities described before. Next slide. From a geographical perspective, you may see in this world map the highlighted countries that are going to spearhead the work on the RIA process. Some of them will be led by UNEP as implementing agency, the unit I'm working for. Some others will be led by colleagues at UNIDO, which is another GEF implementing agency. But nevertheless, regardless the choice of work, we will work as one and collaborate and share all the activities together, because the idea is to build this ready-to-use toolkit, so to say, for parties to obtain the knowledge to replicate the RIA processes at the national level all through time, right? Next slide. How are we going to do this from a practical perspective? Well, as I mentioned, we will work from UNEP and UNIDO side with different executing agencies. Some of them will be regional and coordinate the different participating countries based on different languages. Some others will work directly through national execution in the case of UNIDO, and all of them will work with or will liaise with the national coordination mechanism, which is the national Mercury teams already established to the national action plans, right? UNEP will provide this technical guidance and expertise on the NAP methodology, on the RIA methodology, and will support the entire process for the drafting of the new reports. And all these reports will have an ultimate goal, which will be the knowledge dissemination through UNEP platforms that were already developed through the Global Mercury Partnership or through the Minamata Convention Secretariat. Next slide. As we described before, this process will be guided with adoption, hopefully in COP6, of the different technical reports. So once they are adopted, they will be published and available for the parties, and this will, so to say, provide us the technical background to develop those technical activities. So we have reflected in project documents to be submitted for adoption and approval is the activities needed to put on the ground the different technical aspects of the guidelines to be adopted at COP6. Next slide. What would be a rough timeline estimate? So project documents have been drafted on the site of UNEP, so we have taken the lead in terms of drafting and preparing all the documents needed and endorsement from the 23 countries participating in the RIA process. And we are about to submit this to the GEF Secretariat for a technical review of final endorsement. So hopefully the endorsement of the project will come in the month of November, probably right after the COP6. And as such, in December this year, we will start issuing all legal contracts, and we will set up all the technical and legal structures needed for the implementation of the project. And our intention is to start the pre-activities in Q1 next year, and in 2 years from then, we will obtain the final results to be submitted to Commission as the first RIA updated documents and a lessons learned approach for new projects. So what we are going to, at UNEP, we have identified these 23 countries, parts of the convention, that needed, or they were with the oldest NAPs, were with the demand of the information. But what our intention is for other parties that are in the process of requesting or in the need of a new update to come to us and request participating in new RIA projects. So the RIA project will become as the NAP or of the MIA projects as a ready to use tool for parties to develop technical activities to support the convention. With that, I stop my presentation and I give the floor to our new wonderful colleague and speaker, Anne, who will explain about the experiences in the country. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you, Inaki. You said it all. I think we can directly go to our next speaker, Anne Nakafiro, who is not only national focal point for the Minamata Convention in Uganda, but as well recently is stepped, and he's now co-chair of the Global Warming Partnership. So no need to say that her presentation will be really interesting. Anne, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Thomas, and thanks to UNEP, the Secretariat, and all stakeholders for organizing this event, and for the participants as well. I've already been introduced. Allow me to go straight to the presentation. And this presentation is like, what can I say? It is the beginning, more or less the beginning of the interventions in the ASGM, and then the onset of the NAP development, and then implementation, and then Planet Gold, and where we are now, and that's feeding into the RIA process. Thank you. So I'm going to give a national perspective on the implementation of the NAP, and then the upcoming RIA process, which Inaki has highlighted and the other speakers have highlighted very well. Next, please. This is just to remind ourselves that the Mercury emissions from SGM were more than insignificant.
Apologies, colleagues. It seems like Anne has some connection issues. I think while she tries to reconnect to her network and resume her presentation, we already had a few questions. So I suggest we take some time maybe to address some of the question. And I think for the first question, I will invite, maybe Anne is back. Anne, can you hear us? Not yet. Yeah, so let me invite Richard Gutierrez, maybe for the first question from Immaculate Javia. Thank you. Knowing that NAP has to rest on specific in-country policies or legal frameworks to be implemented, we have in some countries mining and environmental legislation. And the question is, which legal framework should NAP come under? Mining or environment? Richard, maybe you want to give us some insight.
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Toma, and thank you very much, Immaculate, for your question. So the answer is, it's not an either or, but actually it's everything. It's all of the above. Excuse me. So let me, if you will go to the NAP guidance document, the very first step that, that any NAP process needs to undergo is to establish a coordinating mechanism and organization process. So this coordinating mechanism is important because it underlines the very basic nature of the National Action Plan, and that is it is a multi-agency, multi-tiered approach that that each country needs to do and consolidate to ensure that the plan is fully integrated into national laws, and that the coordinating body, and if you look at the NAP guidance, some of the essential some of the entities that that should be part of the coordinating bodies are from the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Mines, Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Finance, Public Health, etc., and even Ministry of Education, Social Services, etc. So it all depends on the extent, but it certainly acknowledges that the coordinating body is needed to ensure that the variety of laws in which the National Action Plan will be integrated into is consistent and supported to what the national objectives are for the country in terms of implementing their Article 7 obligations. So in sum, it's not just one law, it's not just an environmental law. You need to consider it as well mining, finance, trade, etc. Because at the end, the Article 7 obligation is part and parcel of the whole, is only one part of the Minamata Convention. And the Minamata Convention approach has, and its strength is in terms of the life cycle approach to Mercury. And even if you look at the National Action Plan, one of the elements there, you will find public health strategies. You'll find their formalization strategies. You'll also find their strategies to prevent diversion of mercury into ASGM. So it really calls for a multi-stakeholder, multi-agency, because it does recognize you will need to look at various laws to ensure complementation and support for implementation of the National Action Plan. So thank you very much for your question. Back to you, Toma.
Thank you, Richard, for a very complete response. Maybe I will invite Iñaki, if you want to complete as well from the implementation side,
Sure.
Richard's response.
Thank you, Toma, and thanks for the question. I think it's very relevant. I see, I think participants in today's webinar will also find it relevant. From a practical perspective, what we have done when working with different parties and UNEP in developing and drafting these national action plans, and we will try to replicate through the RIA process, is, as Richard was explaining, to identify first who are the key stakeholders at the national level involved in the regulation, all of the different areas and aspects related to artisanal gold mining, right? And as we describe and know already from all the various sources of information available out there, is a very complex and sector of economic activity, right? So different ministries in different countries, depending on the legal structure for the country, might be involved. So typically, the NAP has been guided or piloted from a Ministry of Environment perspective, but those ministries involved in the leading process have always taken into account the different partners at the government level, but not only at the government level, but also at the private sector level, meaning chambers of mines, miners associations, also different enterprise associations which might be involved in the gold supply chain, might also have a word or input into the national strategies, because as Richard was explaining, this is a multi-stakeholder approach. It's a holistic approach. So we always try to engage with everyone who might have a word into the regulation of the sector and the reduction of the mercury use. Because at the end, in order to reduce mercury within the sector, you need to have a behavioral change. You need to change the behavior of miners, actors, and regulators who are used to use mercury in the day-to-day operations and need to find a replacement for that. So it's an educational activity as well. It's a behavioral change, it's a cultural change, a social change, not only an update of the legal framework or an introduction of mercury-free mining processes and techniques or technologies. it also involved a community change, right? And to do so, you need to bear in mind that you need to address all the needs from the different stakeholders, from let's say framework perspective, right? In order to do these activities. Over to you, Thomas.
Thank you very much, Iñaki and Richard, for this very complete response. I think Anne could reconnect. So I suggest we keep some of the remaining questions for the end, and we give the opportunity for Anne to take the floor again. Anne, I think you can switch on your mic and camera and continue your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Thomas. I think the camera might interfere with the connection. Allow me to continue.
Of course.
Yes, thank you so much. So with this particular slide, I wanted to show you that it is possible that mechanization has increased in the ASMs, of course, as a result of the push with support from JEF, UNEP, partners, government of Uganda, to formalize. Only that now the mechanization might be going in not so good direction because of the limitation in access to finance. Yes, so next, please. So, and because of this, then it calls for the review of the NAPs to very well align again the area of mechanization or technology change. And I wish to bring to your attention that after the NAP brought a lot of intersectoral collaboration with regard to mercury use in the ASGM sector. And again, thanks to the support of UNEP and JEF and other partners, that this Mining Act was amended to cover for ASGM. And for us, this is now where formalization started. It started, and the difference between us and most of the countries that have, that have already formalized is that we cater for mining licenses or recognize miners up to the individual level. So even when the miner is not, doesn't feel safe to join an association, but they are economically empowered, they can actually venture into safe gold mining. So I'll not go into the details of the acts, but now we have what I'll call it a framework law that formalizes miners, requires for restoration, reducing pollution, among others. Next, please. So still under the legal reforms with support from Planet Gold, Uganda was able to develop the national environment regulations relating to air quality. And this cuts across sectors, whether cement production, oil and gas, mining, everything. The air quality standards have been elaborated very well. They have been elaborated very well. And for us, I wish to say that as government, our strongest weapon lies in regulation, because regulation is the foundation for partnerships. It's the foundation for creating markets, the foundation for sound environment management. So we are doing well in terms of the legal framework between the time we did the MIAs, the NAP, and now the Planet Gold. So we have the chemicals regulations. This speaks to the mercury added products, the phase out dates, steel mining, again with support from Planet Gold. Next, please. Just again to show you how the NAP has brought close collaboration with sectors. If you see Part E, the law, it is under Ministry of Gender and Labor and Social Development. So there is already a specific law that is looking at occupational health and safety and looking at hazardous chemicals, including mercury. And then we have still draft guidelines. Allow me to mention them because they are being supported again under Planet Gold. We have draft guidelines for the management of mercury alternative hazardous chemicals in ASGM sector. So this is now going to operationalize the regulations that have been developed under the Occupational Health and Safety Act. We have the regulations on mining and minerals still under support of Government of Uganda, Planet Gold, JEF, UNEP, quite a number. Next slide. Yes, so having seen the regulatory regime improve since the MIAs, since NAP, since Planet Gold, allow me to just show you roughly an evaluation of our NAP implementation. And NAP, we had quite a number of objectives, probably about 6, but the first one was to reduce emissions by that percentage. And for now, the measures, the laws that are in place may not be for now reducing emissions significantly, but they are providing for measures to take effect. So, but then again, we need quantitative assessment. Of course, we welcome the UNEP JEF project on global monitoring of POPs and Mercury, and we feel this it will also help us to assess our emissions as well. But again, we need field monitoring tools, you know, that you can station and tell the quality of the air in terms of particulate matter emissions, in terms of mercury, and we feel again the RIA is coming in timely to address such gaps, and probably concepts can be developed. And now I'll also put a lot of emphasis on the second objective, which was to facilitate the formalization of the ASGM sector by 2024. And I'm to note that it actually took place before then. Once the law recognized them, then they are already formed. What is remaining is to operationalize, is to ensure that they are adhering to the regulations, but also the accessing technical assistance. And now, in terms of geoprospecting and allocating land for SGM, which is one of the steps that is regarded as the government of Uganda is creating ASGM zones in areas where gold mining is taking place and artisanals are there. So zoning is now provided for in the regulations, but also the actual zoning out is being undertaken. So we are happy to report on that. But of course, the challenge is that geoprospecting is quite expensive, that much as zoning might be carried out, there is additional support, especially in financial assistance to miners to actually do the geoprospecting probably by themselves. Then part 2, facilitating miner organizations. I'm happy to note that Planet Gold has really done a lot of work. And I wish to emphasize that Planet Gold came in a time when there is a lot of, the ground is not leveled for SGM in Uganda. Formalization, the law was not yet in force, but suspicion, many other things. So, talking to a miner and showing them the value of forming associations has not been simple. But I'm happy to report that there is a very positive direction. A lot of associations have been formed, but of course that is not the end. The challenge is we need to strengthen governance measures in the associations, even after probably the Planet Gold project, where we hope we shall have phase 2 at some point. So allow me to go to licensing and regulating. That one I've already spoken about it. Just scroll below the slide just to make sure that the last row. So for licensing and regulation, that one I have no words to say. The regulations are really in place. So now the part of organizing the supply chain, still that is under the formalization. Planet Gold has been facilitating what I would call miner school field trainings. Like miners would be taken to a demonstration site and shown what is the best practices. And of course, interventions are still required in this area. We have quite a number of miners, the populations are big, so the intervention is still limited, but government is working. Then Planet Gold, and we also look forward to additional partners. Many of them, we've had Dialogos, NAPE put in place in demonstration sites. There are still few, but so still in organizing the supply chain, mine laboratory assessments has been carried out still under the Planet Gold project, and we are in the process of procuring equipment for the demonstration sites. But also I wish to say that Uganda is participating in the extractive industries transparency. So through this, the supply chain, we hope that it will be still organized. But the challenge we have, and which will be eventually revealed in the RIA, is that there is limited effort at the consumer level with regard to gold prices. They are the same even when gold is not produced with mercury. So intervention will be required there. Part 5, to facilitate access to finance assistance and markets. I'm happy to note that government of Uganda, through the public awareness from the MEAs, the NAP, the Planet Gold. There is now commencement of domestic gold purchase program under the Central Bank of Uganda. We had never thought about this. And so government is going to purchase gold from Uganda. And I wish to note that 80% of the gold produced is from the artisans. And of course, giving price incentives for mercury-free gold. So many miners are committing to eliminating mercury use, but of course the gap is there's limited infrastructure for gold marketing, and then technologies are still limited, but also in terms of supply. In terms of supply, they are limited, and also in terms of costs, then maintenance, skills. Then the other one is monitor and enforce regulations. The institutions are in place. And here, as Planet Gold Uganda, as stakeholders, our aim is actually not to run after miners and take them to, police stations and everything. Our aim is to see miners, to see no more economic sense again in continued use of mercury and gold processing. We want them to reach a time when they can weigh options and say, no, I'm not getting enough when I use mercury. So that is our aim. Next, please. Yes, so the other one, of course, was to strengthen stakeholder engagement. A lot has taken place by various partners. I'm happy with the civil society organizations, with government, with Planet Gold. A lot is taking place, but it's still limited. Popularizing IEC materials, going on radio frequently, it is quite costly, but I know we shall get there. And then the other one is to build and strengthen institutional capacity for the management of mercury value chain and using ASGM. Again here, the regulatory framework is in place, but there are limitations in testing tools, coordination of knowledge management, digital transformation. We wish to see a time when a miner can stay at their site and know the price of gold and communicate with the buy purchaser, but the purchaser should and ensure that the go free standards. Then the one is to review and implement a public health strategy on exposure, diagnosis, and treatment of mercury-related complications. Now, this is a gap. This is not fully implemented, and we hope that this is the reason, one of the reasons that why we need actually the RIA process to identify why this is not taking place, and also engage stakeholders in effective its implementation. Next, please.
Maybe, Anne, if you can wrap up your presentation in the next
All
2-3 minutes, so we can keep a little bit of time for the Q&A session. Thank you.
Okay, please. So you please go to the next slide. I think I'll not read that. Please next. I'll just point out where I see that yeah, all those objectives we are not doing well that much. Next, please. So as I conclude, the RIA is very, very timely in as much as the convention requires the review every after 3 years or 2 years. Sorry, I'm forgetting. For us, it is timely because if we had reviewed it in 2022, we wouldn't have captured what has taken place between 22 and now. So it's very timely. It will address emerging issues in ASGM, the issues of biodiversity loss, plastic pollution, energy conservation, research and development, customizing management of contaminated sites, guidelines, development of economic models. Before one ventures into ASGM, they should be able to know whether they will make profit without mercury use or not. And then stakeholder engagement, especially of indigenous people, among others. Next, please. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Anne, and sorry for the short time we have. Indeed, it's only 1 hour, and I think we have quite a few questions in the chat. So maybe I can already invite Iñaki to respond to Linda on the technical trading, including only scientific knowledge, or if it also include other topics such as ancestral knowledge. Iñaki, if you can give a few words.
Yes, thanks a lot, Linda, for the question. I think it's very relevant. What I can say is like all projects, or the implementation of all projects supporting the Minamata Convention, regardless whether they are a national action plan or the upcoming RIA projects or any other type of projects, are always driven from a scientific rational perspective, right? So we try to use all scientific available knowledge, and this scientific knowledge is curated and agreed within the national experts, right? So it's not one person driven activity or intervention in the country, right? It's a common guided knowledge that is disseminated. And what your question about ancestors' knowledge is very interesting and relevant, because even though we try to use the most updated information and the best practices available internationally speaking, in some countries, artisanal gold mining has happened from centuries, right? So miners do have some kind of ancestral or social knowledge that can be applicable to the projects. And some of the national action plan, some of the intervention we've done through the Pinnacle program, for example, have identified and created information on those questions, right? So it's not about the applicability of the ancestors' knowledge, but mostly about the identification and the recompilation of information on this type of knowledge. Thank you. Probably we
Thank
can
you
go
very
from
much,
there.
Iñaki.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Now I think I can invite Richard for two quick questions that I think were headed to you. The first one from Kid is very important. The major requirements for noticing that countries have ASGM as more as that is significant or not in the country.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and thanks, Kiedis, for that question. The definition of what is more than insignificant is not defined under the convention, and the reason for this is that during the negotiating process, the parties or that the negotiators understood that ASGM in each country is very different, and the convention, and as a result of that, the convention allowed the countries the latitude to define for itself, based on its national context, what it sees as metrics or elements that can make ASGM within their territory more than insignificant. For example, excuse me, is it the number of miners that are involved that are using mercury, or is it simply the volume of mercury that's involved, used by very few miners? So again, since these are very different for each country, the latitude, the discretion to define in its own context what it sees as more than insignificance, what was left by the convention to the parties. I hope that is of help. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Now, actually, I'm going to keep you for very few words, maybe to respond to Sheriff, who's asking if UNEP, I guess UNEP or the Minamata Secretariat, is planning to implement the NAPS review.
Okay, first, well, thank you very much, Sheriff, for that question. So as a baseline, the obligation to both implement the NAP and review the NAP falls within it's an obligation by the party. Now, of course, there are projects that are available that could help in the review, as Iñaki has mentioned, but the fundamental obligation is that this falls upon the parties. And I'm curious, maybe at your end, why you say on your question on if the country has not implemented it. What could be the reasons why? Maybe you can elaborate in the chat from your point of view on why your country has not implemented the NAP. Thanks. I hope that is of help. Back to you, Toma.
Thank you, Richard, and sorry for hurrying you out for the questions. I think this concludes actually our webinar on the review of implementation of the Article 7. I would like to thank you, the Minamata Convention, for giving us the space to talk about this important work, but also to all the speakers, starting with Susan, Richard, Iñaki, and of course, Anne. And most importantly, I would like to thank all the participants for your active participation, for your commitment, and for showing interest to this work. I think we'll all be looking forward to all this exciting work coming on, the guidance being soon released, but of course the Jeff project starting in 2026. And I wish ourselves very fruitful work during the COP and in this very exciting new RIA process. Thank you all again for your attention, and I declare the webinar closed now. Thank you very much.